The cafeteria air smelled like floor wax and desperation, but Marisol concentrated on the sludge in her plastic bowl. It took every ounce of her self-control to avoid gagging. Her stomach was in perilous territory, fluttering with a warning that one wrong move would end in disaster. She took a deep breath to steel her nerves. She reminded herself that she had survived worse meals before shoving another spoonful of soup into her mouth. She managed not to spew the liquid across the empty lunch table, though it was a close call. On Tuesdays, the Leonara Heights cafeteria served a free-from split pea soup. It was gluten-free, meat-free, and flavor-free. The color was a shade darker than vomit, and the texture mimicked warm yogurt. Marisol ate every last drop. It was half the price of the pepperoni pizza the lacrosse team was currently guarding 2 tables over. She watched a goalie named Federico Rios attempt to frisbee a greasy slice toward the trash can. It missed by 3 feet, landing with a wet thud on the 200-year-old hardwood floors. The athletes howled with laughter as grease oozed onto the grain. Marisol stared at the discarded, dirt-covered pizza and realized it still looked more appetizing than her soup. "Oh, please," a voice sighed nearby. Marisol didn't have to look up to know it was Sophia Mondragon. Sophia breezed past with a gourmet salad, her navy-pleated skirt fitting her willowy frame with a precision Marisol's off-the-rack uniform lacked. Sophia took over a central table, her Burberry backpack looking heavy enough to snap her spine. "I can't decide," Sophia told her inner circle, pawing at a leaf of kale. "All this stress is spiking my cortisol. I can feel a breakout coming." Marisol leaned back, her corner of the room acting like a natural megaphone for the elite. She was a ghost here, completely invisible to the genetic lottery winners who spent their weekends with world-class plastic surgeons. "Both dresses are amazing, Soph," Paloma said. Paloma was a professional sycophant. Her parents were high-stakes publicists, and she had clearly inherited the gift of talking for 10 minutes without saying a single meaningful word. "The Prada is hotter," Valeria Ortiz added, her blunt black bob shimmering under the fluorescent lights. "It accentuates the figure." Sophia rolled her eyes. "This isn't about looking good. It's about what Ariana is going to like." The name hung in the air like a command. In this school, every outfit, every haircut, and every career path was curated for the approval of Ariana Elfrida. "You could just ask him," Paloma suggested with a toothy, veneered smile. "Some guys like picking out clothes for their girls." Sophia snapped her head around, her green eyes narrowing. "I can't ask him. If Ariana thinks I'm dressing just for him, I'll look desperate. Guys hate that." Marisol almost felt bad for Paloma, but a sudden jolt sent her tray sliding. A lacrosse player had clipped her elbow while jogging past. Her cup of water tipped, sending an icy wave across her lap. "Hey," Marisol called out. The boy didn't even turn around. He was already halfway to his friends, leaving Marisol to watch the water soak through her thick tights and navy skirt. Anger bubbled in her chest as she grabbed a flimsy, useless napkin. She didn't have time to run to the dorms before history. "Here," a voice said. "Take these." Marisol looked up to see Matteo Luna holding out a stack of napkins. He was a gangly boy with a blazer that never quite fit his long arms and a mess of curls he usually tried to hide. "Thanks, Matteo," Marisol said, dabbing at her soaked thighs. "I'm glad I caught you, Marisol," Matteo said, shifting his weight. "Did you see the email? Dean Robles moved the scholarship presentation to tonight." The pea soup in Marisol's stomach did a somersault. "Tonight, 6 p.m. in the auditorium," Matteo confirmed. Marisol fumbled for her phone. The email was there, cold and demanding. These presentations were a song and dance for the faculty, a way for the 2 scholarship kids to prove they weren't wasting a full ride on partying. It was a constant reminder that they were outsiders in a world of black credit cards. "My PowerPoint is done," Matteo said, his voice tightening with a hint of judgment. "I need you to finish your slides by 5:59. Without the typos this time." "I'll get it done," Marisol promised, giving him a strained smile. She tried to pivot to small talk, desperate for a moment of solidarity. "That history paper was intense, right? I thought. I have to get food before they close." Matteo cut her off. He didn't look back as he hurried toward the kitchen line. Marisol mashed a stray pea with her spoon. She didn't blame him for icing her out. Matteo had learned how to blend in, how to mimic the elite. Hanging out with Marisol just reminded everyone where they really came from. The cafeteria doors swung open again, and the room went dead silent. Ariana Elfrida walked in. After 4 years, Marisol thought she'd be used to it, but the Ariana Effect was a force of nature. Every head turned. Conversations died. It was like a movie star had just stepped onto a low-budget set. He moved through the room with a practiced, humble grace. He joked with the athletes, checked on a boy with a broken leg, and dropped $500 into a band fundraiser box without blinking. "Thank you, Ariana," the band kids chirped. "Just wanted to support the team," Ariana said. His voice was low, smooth, and perfect. "Ariana, over here." Sophia waved him down, her table practically vibrating with excitement. They rearranged the seating like a game of musical chairs until the center spot was open for him. Ariana sat down, his long legs folding elegantly under the table. Marisol watched him from her lonely corner. He was dangerously handsome. Thick, dark curls, a jawline that could cut glass, and the broad shoulders of a championship swimmer. He was the 1% of the 1%. But as Marisol stared, she felt that familiar chill. People called him a saint. He volunteered at hospitals and led anti-bullying campaigns. But his eyes told a different story. They were dark, flat, and devoid of any human warmth. Looking into Ariana's eyes was like looking into a void. Sophia leaned in close, her sharp nails digging into Ariana's bicep. "I'm so excited for your party. I have so many ideas. I planned the Mondragon banquet in London last year, you know." "My cousin, the Duchess," said. Ariana smiled. It was an Oscar-worthy performance of interest, but his eyes remained frozen. Matteo approached the table then, tray in hand. The group didn't move for him until Ariana gave a small nod. Instantly, the inner circle shifted, making a tiny sliver of room for the scholarship boy. Marisol looked down at her tray, catching sight of Matteo's lunch. He was eating the split-pea soup, too. She gripped her spoon tighter, her gaze flicking back to the golden boy at the center of the room. "You're late for the meeting, Matteo," Ariana remarked, his voice carrying easily across the silent room. "Are you sure Mr. Luna is coming tonight, Miss Davis?" Dean Robles asked. He sat several feet away, but he still gave the impression of peering down at Marisol through his wireframe glasses. "Yes." Marisol gave him and the other Leonara Heights faculty members a smile, full of confidence she didn't actually feel. "I'm sure Matteo will be here any minute." She wasn't sure at all. Marisol had already sent Matteo 10 different text messages. They ranged from a mild check-in to a desperate demand to know where he was. It was nearing 6:30, and every single one had gone unanswered. Dean Robles sighed. He made a show of checking his watch and steepling his dark hands in his lap. "Given the short notice of our reschedule, I suppose we can spare another 5 minutes." Marisol tried to avoid fidgeting with the microphone. She had been so worried about finishing her part of the presentation that she hadn't had time to change. Her tights, still damp from earlier, stuck uncomfortably to her thighs as they dried. She prayed the heavy metal doors of the auditorium would burst open. She imagined Matteo sprinting down the aisle with a perfect excuse. Instead, the only sound in the large space was the ticking of the clock above the exit. Dean Robles sighed again. He craned his bald head toward the back of the room. "Well, Miss Davis, it doesn't appear that Mr. Luna will be joining us this evening, does it?" Marisol swallowed hard. "Forget you, Matteo," she thought. After tonight, she never wanted to hear another comment about her procrastination. "No, sir," Marisol said. "Then I suppose you'll just have to present your portion alone," Dean Robles said. As if on cue, several faculty members flipped open their leather-bound planners. They were ready to take notes. "I don't mind rescheduling," Marisol said. She fought to keep the panic out of her voice. "You know, when Matteo is able to be here." The dean raised one thick eyebrow. "The rest of us are here, aren't we? If your part is finished, I don't see why you wouldn't just present it tonight." Marisol forced another smile. "No, of course not. That's no problem, sir." He nodded and settled back into his chair. Marisol clicked through the slideshow on the screen until she reached the section she had rushed to finish after lunch. The overhead lights felt too bright. She hoped the teachers couldn't see the nervous sweat on her forehead as she cleared her throat. "I'd like to thank you for being here," Marisol began, "and for investing in my education. You've given me the chance to study at an elite school, and that's a gift I'll never be able to repay." That was the truth. The tuition alone cost more than most people made in years. She saw Dean Robles straighten his shoulders under his tweed jacket. He loved hearing how great Leonara Heights was. Marisol clicked to the first slide. It was a photo of her and Mateo clutching their new school manuals with big, cheesy smiles. It was from the start of freshman year. In the photo, Marisol's brown eyes were full of hope. Her blonde hair was pulled into a neat ponytail. She hardly recognized that girl now. They might have been identical twins, but the girl in the photo didn't have the worry lines Marisol felt on her face today. As you can see, I was very happy to be here, Marisol said. She took a breath and clicked to the next slide. This one showed her most recent grades. She had tried to hide the BS and CS with colorful art and fun transitions. Looking at the stone-faced crowd, she knew it hadn't worked. It seems you've had quite a few CS in history, a gray-haired man called out from the back. And your geometry grades are less than stellar, a math teacher added. Her gaze was sharp. As a senior, I'm surprised you haven't done extra credit to bring those up. I've done some of it, Marisol shot back. Her pulse quickened. I know they aren't ideal, but it's only October and I've been caught up with extracurriculars, hopefully, another teacher interrupted. Debate club? Mathletes. A hot flush crept up Marisol's neck. Well, not those. But I've taken 3 years of advanced art. I didn't have room for it this year, but if you'll let me show you my portfolio. Marisol went to switch the slide, but Dean Robles held up a hand. That's all right, Ms. Davis. We encourage the arts, but our priority is core subjects. If you're struggling there, that is where your focus should be. Marisol gripped the edge of the wooden podium. No, of course, sir. This was exactly why she needed Mateo. Their routine was simple. He dazzled the board with honor roll grades and clubs, while she flew under the radar with her struggling student story. Without his success to distract them, they only had her failures to look at. You're an intelligent student, Marisol, Dean Robles said. He flipped through his planner. Your test scores from 4 years ago prove that. But since then, your performance has plateaued. Do you understand why that is? There was more concern than anger in his voice, but it still made Marisol's heart race. Yes, I understand why you might think. I'm just concerned, the dean continued. I wonder if Leonara Heights is the right place for you. Marisol's eyes went wide. This couldn't be happening. She wasn't going to lose her scholarship because Mateo decided to skip out. She took a long, deep breath. She stared into the bright stage lights until her eyes watered. When she looked back at the crowd, she let the tears stay there. When I was 8, my mother and I were evicted, Marisol started. Her voice had a slight wobble. She was a waitress. We didn't have enough for rent, so we lived out of our car for 3 months. It was the middle of winter. I did my homework at the diner where she worked. We slept in the back seat with blankets and leftovers. She paused for effect. My point is, Leonara Heights changed my life. But it's been a hard adjustment. I spent my childhood worrying about electricity bills, not multiplication tables. I don't want pity. I just want you to know there is no better place for me than here. My grades will get better. I will make this school proud. I promise. Marisol was white-knuckling the podium by the time she finished. She waited. She looked at Dean Robles. His eyes were glassy. Another teacher was dabbing at her lip with a tissue. Marisol used her sleeve to wipe her own eyes. That's quite a story, Ms. Davis, the dean finally said. Your academic work needs help, but I think we all look forward to seeing what you do with this opportunity. Relief washed over her. It worked. The story was technically true, though she left out a few details, like the fact that they were evicted because her mom was caught cheating on the landlord, or that winter in Saltillo meant 50-degree weather. But pity was a powerful tool. Just remember, college applications are coming up, the dean warned. We expect better grades and an acceptance letter soon. Marisol gave him a wide, grateful smile. I'm sure you will see them, sir. Marisol was fuming as she walked back to her dorm. The freezing wind cut right through her thin jacket. The only thing keeping her warm was the anger in her chest. Mateo still hadn't texted. No apology. Nothing. 2 girls walked past her in expensive designer coats, laughing. Marisol felt a sharp sting of jealousy. She hated that she wanted those things, but being around this much wealth made it hard not to notice what she didn't have. She rounded the corner toward the senior dorms. Under the full moon, the old stone buildings looked like something out of a movie. Leonara Heights had endless money to keep everything looking perfect. Marisol shoved open the heavy oak doors to the west wing. The common room was empty. She hurried to the fireplace to catch some warmth. The room was split by two staircases, one for girls, one for boys. Marisol stared at the boys' side. Was Mateo up there right now? Was he playing games or sleeping while she almost lost everything? Forget you, Mateo, she whispered. He could ignore her in the halls, but tonight he was supposed to be her partner. The more she thought about it, the angrier she got. She started climbing the stairs. She wanted an explanation. She reached the boys' common area. It was decorated with sports jerseys and posters. She had never been up here before. No boy had ever invited her. She ignored that sting and found the housing list on the wall. Mateo Luna, room 504. She climbed the final flight of stairs. Her legs burned, but she didn't stop. Room 504 was at the very end of a dim hallway. As she turned the corner, she saw a shadow near the fire exit. Mateo, she called out. The person flinched. Instead of turning around, they ducked into the stairwell. For a split second, the bright hall light hit his face. It wasn't Mateo. It was Ariana Elfrida. Marisol blinked, confused. Ariana was the school's golden boy. Why was he scurrying away like a thief? She shook it off and reached Mateo's door. Her hand hovered over the wood. Maybe she should just go back to her room. But she was already here. She knocked hard. Mateo, are you in there? Silence. She knocked again, and this time, the door creaked open. It hadn't been latched. Mateo, I'm coming in, she said, ready to yell at him. But the room was empty. The large window at the back was wide open, letting in the freezing night air. Marisol walked toward the desk to close it. Then she looked down. Marisol froze. Her heart stopped. Down on the concrete 5 stories below, a body lay twisted in the light of the courtyard. It was Mateo. A second later, someone outside began to scream. Are you sure you were at the library, Ariana? Marisol's voice cut through the chatter of the cafeteria like a blade. The clatter of plastic forks against plates stopped. At the center table, Ariana Elfrida froze. He didn't turn around right away. He just sat there with his back to her, his shoulders rigid under his expensive designer jacket. Sophia Mondragon blinked her tear-stained eyes. She looked at Marisol like she was a bug that had just landed in her gourmet salad. What is that supposed to mean, Marisol? Ariana just got here. Don't be weird. Marisol didn't look at Sophia. She kept her eyes locked on the back of Ariana's head. Her heart hammered against her ribs so hard it hurt. She remembered the dim lighting of the West Wing hallway. She remembered the tall, dark silhouette and the way the shadows had played off those same curls. Ariana slowly turned in his seat. He didn't look angry. He didn't even look nervous. He wore a mask of perfect, calm concern. The library, Ariana repeated. His voice was smooth, like polished stone. I was finishing my history paper. Why do you ask? I saw you, Marisol said. Her voice was louder now. A few students at the nearby tables leaned in. Last night, in the West Wing, you were standing near the stairwell right after the alarms went off. Ariana let out a soft, dry chuckle. It wasn't a mean laugh. It was the kind of laugh a person uses when they are talking to someone who is clearly confused. Marisol, you've had a really rough night, Ariana said. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. We all have. Mateo was, well, he was a friend to all of us. You're probably just seeing things because of the shock. I'm not seeing things, Marisol snapped. She stood up, her chair screeching against the linoleum floor. You were there. I called out to you. I thought you were Mateo at first because you both have that same dark hair. You looked right at me, and then you disappeared into the stairwell. The table went silent. Sophia looked between Ariana and Marisol. A flicker of doubt crossed her face before she wiped it away with a practiced pout. Ariana was with us earlier in the day, Paloma added, rubbing Sophia's arm. He wouldn't lie about something like that. Why would he? Exactly, Ariana said. He turned back to the table, dismissing Marisol without another word. I think Marisol just needs some sleep. Someone should probably walk her back to her room. Marisol felt a hot flush of anger crawl up her neck. They were treating her like she was losing her mind. She looked at the lasagna on her plate. It looked gray and unappetizing now. She looked at the grief dogs near the entrance and the posters for counseling. Everything about this place felt fake. She turned and walked out of the cafeteria. She didn't head to her room. Instead, she walked toward the West Wing. The yellow police tape was still there, fluttering in the wind. The concrete where Mateo had landed had been washed clean, but Marisol could still see the spot in her mind. It was a stain that wouldn't go away. She looked up at the 4th-floor window of Mateo's room. It was closed tight. He didn't do it. Marisol whispered to herself. She thought back to her interview with Detective Milagro. The detective had asked if there were signs. Marisol had said no. But now, she realized the sign wasn't something Mateo did. The sign was something Ariana was doing. Why lie? If he was just a witness, he would have told the police. If he had just been walking by, there was no reason to hide it. The only reason to lie about being at the library was if he was somewhere he wasn't supposed to be. Marisol ducked under the police tape. Her pulse drifted into her throat. She knew she shouldn't be here. If an officer saw her, she'd lose her scholarship in a heartbeat. But she needed to see Mateo's door one more time. The hallway was cold. The air smelled like industrial cleaner and old carpet. She reached room 412. A small evidence seal was taped across the door frame. Marisol leaned her head against the wood. "What happened, Mateo?" she breathed. A floorboard creaked behind her. Marisol spun around. The hallway was empty. The long stretch of doors remained shut. But she felt it. Someone was watching her. She looked toward the end of the hall, toward the stairwell where she had seen Ariana the night before. The door to the stairs was heavy metal. It was slightly ajar. Marisol walked toward it, her sneakers silent on the carpet. She pushed the door open an inch. The stairwell was dim, lit only by the red glow of the exit sign. She looked down the center gap of the railings. 6 floors of concrete and steel. She began to climb. She didn't know why. Maybe she expected to find a dropped glove or a footprint. She reached the roof access door. It was locked, just like it was supposed to be. Only staff had the key. She turned to go back down when she saw it. Tucked into the corner of the landing, half hidden by a trash can, was a small white card. Marisol picked it up. It wasn't a student ID. It was a visitor's pass for a high-end law firm downtown. The name on the pass wasn't Mateo or Ariana. It was blank. But the date on the bottom was yesterday's date. A heavy hand landed on her shoulder. Marisol screamed and dropped the card. She whirled around, her back hitting the cold brick wall. It was the officer with the mustache, the one who had driven her home. He didn't look friendly anymore. He looked annoyed. "This is a restricted area, kid," the officer said. He looked down at the white card on the floor, then back at Marisol. "I told you to get some sleep. What are you doing up here?" I thought I saw someone," Marisol stammered. The officer picked up the card. He glanced at it and shoved it into his pocket. He didn't put it in an evidence bag. He didn't even seem surprised to find it. "Go back to your dorm," he ordered. He grabbed her arm, his grip just a little too tight. "If I catch you sneaking around the crime scene again, I'm calling the dean. You want to keep that scholarship, don't you?" He led her down the stairs and out the front door. He watched her until she crossed the quad and entered the east wing. Marisol went to her room and locked the door. She sat on the edge of her bed, her hands shaking. She thought about Ariana's calm smile. She thought about the officer hiding that card. She grabbed her phone and opened her messages. She scrolled past the angry text she had sent Mateo. She went to the very last message he had sent her 3 days ago. "Don't trust the water here, Marisol. It's all tainted." At the time, she thought he was joking about the old pipes in the West Wing. Now, she realized he wasn't talking about the plumbing. She heard a soft thud against her door. Marisol froze. She held her breath, listening. A small piece of paper slid under the door. It was a printed photo. She picked it up. It was a picture of her standing in the stairwell, holding the white card. Someone had been watching her from the shadows. On the back of the photo, 4 words were written in neat, elegant handwriting. "Stick to the script." Marisol looked at her reflection in the mirror. She looked pale. She looked like a girl who was about to break. But she also looked like a girl who knew a secret. She walked to her window and looked out at the campus. Ariana Elfrida was standing on the lawn below. He was looking straight up at her window. He raised a coffee cup in a silent toast. Marisol pulled the curtains shut. Her phone buzzed in her hand. It was an unknown number. "Hello," she whispered. "You should have touched your water, Marisol," the voice on the other end said. It was Detective Milagro. "Why are you calling me from a blocked number?" Marisol asked. "Because the library security footage from last night just went missing," Milagro said. Her voice was hurried and low. "And Ariana Elfrida's grandfather just made a very large donation to the police pension fund. Stay in your room. Lock the door. Don't let anyone in." "Even the police?" Marisol asked. The line went dead. "Leonara Heights has a very short memory," Marisol muttered, her voice lost under the hum of 1,000 private conversations. The bright yellow crime scene tape still hugged Mateo's dorm room. but the rest of the campus was already moving on. On Wednesday, men in hazmat suits scrubbed the sidewalk with chemicals to peel away the blood. By Friday, the grief was officially scheduled for a time slot. Professors sent out cold emails reminding everyone that deadlines were still active, though they kindly added a tiny note about the school counselor at the bottom. Marisol watched her social media feed shift from rest in peace posts to grainy videos of the lacrosse team getting trashed. By the time the weekend hit, Mateo was just a scholarship kid who couldn't handle the pressure. Then, she found the flyer. Mateo's awkward yearbook photo stared back at her. The candlelight vigil was set for Saturday, fully sponsored by the Elfrida family. "Of course it is," she whispered, tracing the tiny print at the bottom. She thought about what her mom's boyfriend, Ricardo, always said: people only lie when they have something to hide. Usually, Marisol ignored Ricardo's conspiracy theories, but the memory of Ariana Elfrida in the hallway that night wouldn't stop itching. Maybe he lied to the police to avoid a long night of questions. Maybe he was just protecting his reputation. But as Marisol pulled on her only black dress, a hand-me-down from middle school that squeezed her ribs, she couldn't shake the feeling that the truth was much uglier. The quad looked like a movie set. Thousands of candles and lanterns flickered against the twilight, casting long, dancing shadows over the grass. Roses and forget-me-nots were woven into green arches leading to a stage. Marisol crossed her arms, trying to hide a small rip in the seam of her dress. She felt like a thumb in a room full of silk. Everywhere she looked, girls like Sophia wore vintage designer pieces that cost more than Marisol's tuition. "I'm here for Mateo," Marisol told herself, stiffening her back. "The dress doesn't matter." Dean Robles took the podium. His skin looked like polished wood under the candlelight. He gave a short, sterile speech filled with suicide statistics and regret. He didn't cry. He just held a handkerchief like a prop. To Marisol, he looked like a man who had already made Mateo's parents sign a waiver promising not to sue the school. When Mateo's mother stood up, the atmosphere shifted. She had the same frizzy curls and bright blue eyes as her son. Leonara Heights was Mateo's dream, she sobbed, her voice breaking over the microphone. "He was so happy here. I never thought." She collapsed into heaving cries. Marisol looked away, her throat tight with a mix of pity and discomfort. That was when she saw her. A girl stood on the very edge of the crowd, far away from the other students. She wasn't wearing a cocktail dress. She had on a plain black long-sleeved shirt and jeans. Her shoulders shook violently as she wept, her dark hair falling over her face like a curtain. Marisol squinted. She knew every face at Leonara Heights, and this girl didn't belong. She looked like she was hiding in plain sight. The girl felt the stare. She looked up, locking eyes with Marisol for a split second. Her eyes went wide with pure panic. Without a word, she turned and bolted toward the iron gates of the campus. "Hey!" Marisol started to move, but the crowd was too thick. By the time she pushed past a group of seniors, the girl was gone. A slideshow of Mateo's life began to play on the giant screen. Most were childhood photos, but then came the Leonara Heights shots. Mateo was in the big group photos with Sophia and the elites, but he was always at the very edge. He was a blurred figure in the background, a prop used to make the group look inclusive. He was an afterthought, Marisol realized. She had tried to be his friend. She had tried to bond over being outsiders, but Mateo had pushed her away every time. He wanted so badly to belong to the people who were currently checking their watches during his memorial. The crowd suddenly perked up. Ariana Elfrida was walking toward the mic. He wore a black suit that looked like it had been carved onto his frame. He looked like a grieving prince. He took a long, shaky breath before speaking. "Mateo and I were friends," Ariana said, his voice thick with emotion. "I took him under my wing. He was a kind person. We worked 12-hour shifts at the soup kitchen together, and he never complained." A soft, collective ah went through the crowd. "I wonder how much he was secretly suffering," Ariana continued. His voice cracked. He stopped, wiped an unshed tear, and let out a breathless huff. "I'm sorry. I didn't want to get emotional tonight." The crowd was mesmerized. Even Mateo's mother smiled at him through her tears. Marisol watched his hands. They were resting flat on the podium. There was no shaking, no white knuckles, no tension. He looked like an actor hitting his marks for a mid-season finale. "It's fake," Marisol whispered to herself. The bitterness in her throat tasted like copper. She watched him hug Mateo's parents, the perfect image of empathy. As the ceremony ended, Ariana began to move through the crowd, receiving pats on the back from the lacrosse team. He walked right past her. Impulse took over. Marisol reached out and grabbed the sleeve of his expensive suit. The fabric felt like water between her fingers. "You said you were close to Mateo," Marisol said, her heart hammering against her ribs. It must have been awful, seeing him like that after it happened. Ariana didn't look at her at first. He kept his eyes forward. "Oh, I wouldn't know. I was fortunate enough to be in the library when Mateo jumped." Marisol leaned in, her voice a sharp needle. "No, you weren't. You're lying." That stopped him. Ariana turned his head slowly. Up close, his eyes were terrifying. They were framed by thick lashes, but the centers were hollow. He didn't look at her like a person. He looked at her like a problem to be solved. He scanned her from her messy hair down to her ripped dress. His lips curled into a practiced, handsome smile. "I suppose you're right," Ariana said smoothly. "I wasn't in the library at the exact moment. I was on my way out." "No," Marisol snapped, her voice low. "You weren't at the library at all. You were in the boys' dorm, on Mateo's floor. You saw him, Ariana. Or you heard him." The smile stayed, but his eyes narrowed into cold slits. "I think you have me confused with someone else." He pulled his arm back, tugging the fabric from her grip. He began to step away, but then he paused. He looked back over his shoulder, his expression unreadable. "I don't think I caught your name," he said. "Marisol," she managed to say. "Marisol." He tasted the name, his voice like velvet. "It was lovely to meet you." He walked away, disappearing into a sea of black suits and designer dresses. Marisol stood frozen, her hand still hovering in the air where his sleeve had been. "He knows," she whispered. "And now he knows I know. Is this Detective Milagro?" Marisol gripped her phone so hard her knuckles turned white. Her voice shook, betraying the calm she was trying to fake. "Yes. Who is this?" "It's Marisol. Marisol Davis." A heavy silence hung on the line. Marisol swallowed against the dry lump in her throat. She could hear the faint rustle of paper on the other end before the detective's voice returned, sounding muffled and tired. "Yes, Miss Davis. I remember you. Is there a reason you're calling me at 10 o'clock at night?" Marisol nervously flicked the edge of the business card in her hand. It was the same card Milagro had pressed into her palm after the first interrogation. Back then, Marisol thought she would never use it. "I'm sorry to bother you at home," Marisol said, her words tripping over each other. "I don't want to waste your time, and this might be nothing. But you said to call if I remembered something. It's not about Mateo specifically. It might not even be relevant, but why don't you come into the office before your classes tomorrow?" Milagro interrupted. Her voice had lost its sharp edge of annoyance. "We can talk about this in person." Marisol fell back onto her comforter, a wave of relief washing over her. The thought of trying to explain her suspicions over a recorded phone line felt impossible. "Okay, yeah, that sounds good." The next morning, Marisol sat in the same sterile interrogation room. The fluorescent lights felt less like a spotlight in the morning sun, but she still felt the weight of sleep deprivation. "Here," Milagro said, sliding a paper cup across the metal table. "You look like you need this." Marisol didn't hesitate. She took a long, hot gulp of the black coffee. "Thanks." Detective Milagro didn't look much better. Her chestnut hair was pulled back into a bun so tight it looked painful. She looked like she had stepped straight out of a military barracks. She clicked her pen and leaned forward. "Well, Miss Davis, tell me what you know." Marisol laid it all out. She talked about seeing Ariana Elfrida in the dorm room. She explained how he lied about being in the library and recounted their tense conversation at the vigil. The more she spoke, the more she felt like a conspiracy theorist. To the rest of the world, Ariana was a saint. He had done more for Mateo's memory in 3 days than Marisol had done for him in 3 years. But Milagro didn't laugh. She filled a yellow notepad with steady, rhythmic scribbles. When Marisol finally ran out of breath, the detective looked up. "Is that everything?" Marisol nodded, picking at the cardboard sleeve of her coffee. "You can tell me if I'm being ridiculous. I know how it sounds. Ariana is nice to everyone. Even if he's lying, it's probably not about Mateo. Lying about where you were the night someone died is never nothing," Milagro said firmly. "But it was a suicide, right?" Marisol asked. "He doesn't really need an alibi if there wasn't a crime." "The pathologist believes it was a suicide," Milagro muttered, her eyes dropping back to her notes. And you? Do you believe that? The detective's pen stopped mid-word. She cleared her throat and looked Marisol in the eye. The most likely cause is suicide. However, there are a few details that don't fit a standard open and shut case. Marisol froze. Her heart skipped a beat. Details? Milagro stayed silent for a long moment, watching Marisol over the rim of her own cup. Finally, she leaned back. You're not like your classmates, are you, Ms. Davis? Marisol blinked, caught off guard by the personal turn. I'm not sure what you mean, detective. You didn't grow up with money. It wasn't a question. Marisol felt a flash of heat in her cheeks. She didn't talk about the trailer parks or the public housing apartments. She didn't mention the constant moving or the empty cupboards. But Milagro looked at her with a knowing gaze that said she already knew the answer. No, ma'am, Marisol said quietly. Quite the opposite. Me too, Milagro said. She rubbed the bridge of her nose. At first glance, Mateo's death looks like a typical case. Overworked kid, high-pressure school, academic burnout. But Mateo was doing well. He had friends. He wasn't isolated. But depression can be hidden, Marisol argued. He had no history of it, Milagro countered. No note. No big life changes. And the fall itself was strange. Most jumpers have a clean, straight fall. Mateo landed on his back. That means he fell backward with more force than we'd expect from someone just stepping off a ledge. Marisol felt the air leave the room. Her head began to spin. You think Mateo was murdered? You think Ariana did it? The detective's expression turned into a mask of stone. Nobody is saying that. The case needs more work. You will not say a word of this to anyone. The words murder and Ariana better not come out of your mouth in the same sentence. Is that clear? Crystal, Marisol whispered. But what you told me today? Milagro stood up, grabbing her notepad. This might be the lead we need to find the truth. If Ariana is involved, it won't be easy, Marisol warned. He's an Elfrida. That name is royalty here. Milagro offered a ghost of a smile. Well, I'm from Canada. Royalty doesn't impress me much. She walked Marisol to the door and stopped, placing a hand on the girl's shoulder. When you grow up like we did, you learn to see through the smoke. You see people for who they really are. Those are good instincts, Marisol. Don't let these rich kids make you doubt them. The fallout happened the following Monday. Marisol sat in the back of the large lecture hall for college preparations. It was the only time the entire senior class was in one room. It was usually a waste of time. Most of these students had their futures bought and paid for since middle school. Marisol kept her eyes on the back of Ariana's head. He was 3 rows down and 15 seats over. He hadn't looked at her once since the vigil. To him, she was just part of the furniture. Professor Aranda was droning on about MLA format when a sharp knock echoed through the hall. Dean Robles stepped inside, his face pale and grim. Dean Robles, Aranda said, looking confused. Can I help you? I apologize, the dean said, his eyes scanning the rows of students. But I need to borrow a student. Ariana Elfrida? Can you come with me, please? A wave of whispers broke out. Marisol's stomach did a slow, sickening flip. Ariana didn't look worried at all. He stood up with a lazy, charming smile. Of course, sir. I'm not in any trouble, am I? That was when Detective Milagro walked in. She looked like a different person in her professional gear. Her badge glinted under the harsh lights, and the heavy black holster on her hip was impossible to miss. I have a few questions for you, Mr. Elfrida, Milagro said. Her voice cut through the whispers like a knife. Bring your bag. For a split second, Ariana's smile flickered. The mask slipped, showing a flash of something dark and cold. But it was gone before Marisol could be sure she saw it. Whatever you need, Detective, Ariana said smoothly. He slung his leather bag over his shoulder. You won't need to call my parents, will you? A few students giggled at the joke. Milagro didn't join them. You're 18. I don't need your parents. Let's go. She led him out of the room. Ariana towered over her, but the detective didn't look intimidated. As the door shut, the room exploded into frantic gossip. Professor Aranda banged his book on the podium, trying to get order, but it was useless. Marisol slumped in her seat. She felt a cold shiver run down her spine. The detective had taken her seriously, which was good, but she had made a scene. She had humiliated the most powerful boy in school in front of everyone.